The strongest chains are the ones you can't see. Some prisons don't have walls, no locks, no guards, just a feeling. A subtle weight in your chest when you say no. A tightness in your throat when you pull away. A silent voice that says, "You're being selfish. You're letting them down. You're wrong for choosing you." That's not truth. That's not conscience. That's not morality. It's programming. You weren't born with guilt. You were trained into it. Repetition, reactions, rejection, masked as love. Over time, you learned that peace means compliance, that love means obedience, that freedom means you're the bad one. So now, every time you start to break free, the code activates. You don't even think, you just stop. Not because it's wrong, but because you've been conditioned to feel like it is. This video is about that code, the guilt reflex, the invisible programming. That makes you obey without knowing why and how to deactivate it for good. Guilt deprogramming initiated. Part 1. What is a subconscious guilt code? A subconscious guilt code isn't logical. It's not based on ethics. It's not about right or wrong. It's about control. Installed early, installed quietly, installed deep. You don't think it, you feel it. A wave of pressure when you say no, a tightness in your gut when you put yourself first, a subtle urge to explain, to soften, to retreat. That's not your intuition, that's the code. It lives in your nervous system, not your thoughts, which is why you can't argue it away. You know what's true, but something pulls you back, not with reason, with emotion, with guilt. You're being harsh. You're not being loving. They did so much for you. Don't break the peace. You've heard those lines before, not from your voice, but from theirs. And now you repeat them to yourself without even noticing. That's how the code works. It turns your inner compass against your own liberation. You don't need anyone to stop you. You'll stop yourself. Right on schedule, right at the edge of your boundary, right before the breakthrough, because that's where guilt always kicks in. You weren't born to feel guilty for honoring your truth. You were trained to. And until you see the code dash, it will keep running your life from underneath your awareness. Part 2. How guilt was installed into you. No one had to scream, no one had to hit, no one had to say, "Don't do that again." They just looked disappointed. They went quiet. They sighed. They withdrew love without explanation. And you felt it. That's how guilt gets installed, not with trauma, but with tension, emotional pressure. That rewires your nervous system to associate authenticity with disconnection. You were punished for expressing, not with words, but with absence, with subtle emotional withdrawal. That said, this version of you isn't safe here. Change back, and you'll be loved again. So you learned, fast, silently. You smiled more, asked less, shrank your needs, dimmed your light, made yourself easy to digest, because being guilt-free meant being rejected, and being guilty meant staying connected, and they called it love. But it was conditioning, wrapped in culture, wrapped in sacrifice, wrapped in phrases like, "We did everything for you." You'll understand when you're older. Don't be selfish, think of the family. We never asked for much. You didn't hear those words. You absorbed them. And now, they live in your reflexes, your pauses, your fear of disappointing. You were trained to choose guilt over freedom, to obey the system over your own truth. And the saddest part? You thought that meant you were a good person. But the truth is, you were just well programmed. Part 3. Symptoms of living under guilt programming. You think you're being polite, empathetic, responsible, but what if it's not kindness? What if it's conditioning? Here's how you know. You're still under the code. You apologize for having boundaries. You say no dash. Then explain it 3 times. You cancel a plan. Then overcompensate. You speak your truth. Then feel the need to soften it right after. That's not integrity. That's guilt reflex. You feel responsible for how others feel. If someone's upset, you think it's your fault, even if you did nothing wrong, even if their discomfort is caused by your honesty. You step in, you calm them, you fix what isn't yours, because somewhere in you still believes if they suffer, it's because I failed. You overfunction in every space. You do too much, care too much, carry too much, because guilt taught you that your value depends on what you endure, so rest feels selfish. Saying, I can't, feels wrong. Letting others struggle feels like betrayal. That's not compassion, that's programming. You seek validation before permission. You don't take action unless someone else approves. You wait, hesitate, check in, play safe. Because guilt told you, if you move alone, you're reckless, ungrateful, dangerous. So now you over-ask and under-trust yourself, not because you're unsure, but because the code still runs underneath your clarity. You explain yourself, even when no one asked. You're always anticipating judgment, always preempting conflict, always narrating your intent, because guilt made you believe, if they misunderstand, it's your job to fix it. So you over-talk, over-justify, over-express, and call it communication. But it's not. It's invisible obedience. These aren't just habits. They're signals, proof that somewhere inside you're still living in a script that was never yours. And until you break it, you'll keep playing the version of you that feels safe to them, even when it kills your truth. Part 4. Why guilt keeps you obedient. Control doesn't always come from outside. Sometimes the most powerful control lives inside you, in your hesitation, in your second guessing, in your need to explain, soften, delay. And the system knows, if it can make you feel guilty enough, it doesn't need to say a word. Guilt doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't restrain you, it makes you restrain yourself. And that's why it works. You think you're making your own choices. You think you're protecting others. You think you're being fair. But really, you're following a script that rewards obedience with temporary peace. Guilt is the silent enforcer. It makes you adjust your volume. Without being asked, it makes you question your truth. Before anyone challenges it, it makes you apologize for taking up space you were never forbidden to occupy, because guilt isn't about what's wrong. It's about what feels dangerous. And when you've been conditioned long enough, telling the truth feels dangerous. Standing your ground feels selfish. Saying no feels cruel. Choosing yourself feels like betrayal. So you don't resist them. You resist yourself, and you call it being kind, being loyal, being a good person. But what if it's none of those things? What if it's just submission in disguise? That's why guilt lasts. Not because it's moral, but because it's invisible. It hides in your politeness, your helpfulness, your silence, and as long as it stays hidden, it runs everything. Part 5. How to deprogram the guilt reflex. You don't escape guilt. By thinking harder, you escape it. By breaking the reflex, because guilt isn't a belief. It's a loop, and if you don't disrupt it, you'll keep living inside it. Even when you know you've outgrown it. Here's how to dismantle the loop. 1. Pause. When guilt activates. When you feel it, don't obey it. Just pause. Breathe. Catch the reflex before it hijacks the moment. Ask yourself, am I actually doing something wrong? Or am I just breaking a rule that was never mine? That question interrupts the obedience. Second act. Without explaining. Say no. Cancel the plan. Set the boundary. But don't explain it. Don't soften it. Don't justify it. Don't narrate your intention. Because guilt lives in the extra words. So you say less dash and let the silence. Do what guilt always tries to avoid. Hold tension. 3. Do the right thing without feeling nice. Sometimes choosing you won't feel good. Sometimes it will feel cold, selfish, uncomfortable. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It means the code is breaking. Keep going, because healing isn't always warm. Sometimes it's unapologetic. 4th, notice who guilt serves. Every time you feel guilt, ask, who benefits if I back down? If the answer is, the people who want me quiet, compliant, small, then guilt isn't your conscience. It's their protection system, and your freedom is their discomfort. Let it be. 5. Practice clean boundaries without closure. Don't explain why you pulled away. Don't clarify why you stopped responding. Don't revisit what they already knew. The more you resist explaining, the more the guilt loses control, because you're no longer running the guilt-based operating system. You're building something else: autonomy, sovereignty, self-trust. This is how guilt dies, not with a fight, but with quiet non-compliance, no noise, no war, just clean disobedience of the emotion that once controlled you. Part 6. Conclusion. You were trained to feel guilty for becoming free. You were never wrong for choosing yourself. You were just trained to feel wrong whenever you stopped choosing them. They called it selfish when you drew a boundary, ungrateful when you questioned tradition, cruel when you stopped carrying their pain. But what they really meant was, you're no longer easy to manage. And that made them uncomfortable. So they used guilt, not as punishment, but as programming, a soft weapon, a silent leash to make sure you would always think twice before walking away, not because it was wrong, but because it felt wrong. But here's the truth. The feeling of guilt doesn't mean you're doing harm. It often means you're doing something new, something sovereign, something they never gave themselves permission to do. And now that you're doing it, it shakes their foundation, not because you betrayed them, but because you exposed how much they betrayed themselves. So you walk anyway, you choose anyway, you live anyway, with the discomfort, with the silence, with the residue of the old code. Because every step forward scrambles the system that once controlled you. Final CTA. For the next 72 hours, feel the guilt, don't obey it. Let it rise, let it pass, let it scream, then do what you were going to do anyway, because guilt isn't your moral compass. It's just the echo of a cage you've already walked out of. Guilt deprogramming complete.